You know, when you think of helicopters, commandos, and a high-stakes seizure on the open ocean, you probably think of a Hollywood movie, right? Well, this isn't a script. This is the very real story of an oil tanker called the Skipper, and it's a story that cracks open a secret world of ghost ships and the new front lines of economic war. So let's get into it. So let's just start with this question. How do you make a ship that's over 1,000 feet long, that's longer than 3 football fields, just vanish? It sounds like some kind of magic trick, doesn't it? But for a growing shadow fleet of ships, it's just business as usual. And the Skipper? Well, it was one of their star players.
I mean, listen to this quote from the AP. U.S. commandos fast roping from helicopters. This is not your average Coast Guard inspection. This was a full-blown military operation. And using commandos and helicopters like this, that sends a very, very clear message. The game has changed.
Okay, so let's dive into the raid itself. What exactly went down in the Caribbean that day, and why is it such a big deal? So here's the headline of it. December 10th, 2025. U.S. forces grabbed this oil tanker, the Skipper. Now, this was not some random boarding. Nope. This was a very deliberate move in a long-running economic squeeze play. The goal is to use sanctions, basically financial and trade restrictions, to choke off the oil money that's propping up Nicolas Maduro's government in Venezuela. And what was the prize? A staggering 2 million barrels of illicit crude oil. We are talking about tens of millions of dollars that were supposed to go straight into the Maduro regime's pockets. Poof. Gone. It was a huge financial hit, for sure, but it was also a warning shot to everyone else playing this game.
But why the Skipper? Why this specific ship? To answer that, we have to pull back the curtain on this really secretive world it was a part of, the world of the so-called Ghost Armada.
So what is this shadow fleet? Well, think of it exactly like a ghost armada. It's this whole network of hundreds of old, beat-up tankers. A lot of them aren't even insured, and their one and only job is to break sanctions. They're the getaway drivers for countries like Venezuela, Iran, and Russia, helping them sneak their oil out to buyers, mostly in China.
You know, hiding a vessel this big is a real art form, and these guys have a whole playbook. First, they'll fly a fake flag, pretending to be registered in a country they have no connection to. Then, they'll spoof their location by broadcasting bogus GPS data from their AIS. Sometimes they just go dark and switch their transponder off completely to just disappear. And if that's not enough, they'll do these risky ship-to-ship transfers out in the middle of the ocean to hide where the oil really came from. It's a massive shell game, played on a global scale.
And this is exactly how the Skipper got busted. See, all the public tracking data said it was just chilling off the coast of Guyana, but in reality, it was hundreds of miles away, actively loading oil at a terminal in Venezuela. It was such a brazen lie, and it basically painted a giant target on its back for the U.S. military.
An armed seizure on the high seas. It sounds like something out of the 1700s, right? But here in the 21st century, the big question is, was this legit policing, or was it straight-up piracy?
Well, as you can probably imagine, the two sides have two very different stories. Venezuela, seeing its economic lifeline threatened, immediately called it an act of international piracy. The U.S., on the other hand, framed it as simple law enforcement, just a necessary action to make sure its sanctions were being followed. And just listen to Nicolas Maduro himself. He did not mince words. Kidnapped, stole, criminal naval piracy. I mean, that's the kind of language you use when you feel like you're under siege, and it just shows you how high the geopolitical temperature really is.
But the U.S. wasn't just winging it. They were working from a legal playbook, specifically something in international law called the right of visit. And what it says, basically, is that a warship can board another vessel if they have good reason to suspect certain things are going on. The key condition for us here, that last one, if a ship is without nationality.
And that is the key. That's the legal justification the U.S. hung its hat on. The Skipper was flying a Guyanese flag, right? But here's the thing. Guyana had already deregistered the ship after it got sanctioned back in 2022. So, by flying a flag it had no right to, the Skipper legally became stateless, a ship with no country. And, under international law, that opened the door for the U.S. Navy to step right in. All right, so we've got this dramatic legal showdown on the high seas. And you might be thinking, oh great, this is going to cause chaos in the oil markets and my gas prices are about to go sky high. But to really get the economic impact here, we have to zoom out a bit.
You see, timing is
everything. And this whole raid happened right in the middle of a global superglut of oil. Basically, countries like the US and Brazil are pumping out so much oil that the market is just flooded. Prices were already hitting a 6-month low before any of this even went down.
And check out this number. This really puts it all into perspective. The International Energy Agency is forecasting a surplus of nearly 4 million barrels per day by 2026. Per day. That's a mind-boggling amount of extra oil sloshing around the system.
So what does all this mean for you when you go to fill up your car? Honestly, probably not much. Venezuela's oil production is just a tiny drop in the global bucket. So even if the US managed to stop every single tanker leaving Venezuela, it's just not enough to cause a big price spike in a market that's this oversupplied.
Okay, so if this isn't really about your gas prices, then what is it about? Well, the real impact here isn't economic, it's psychological. This seizure was a shot across the bow for the entire shadow economy. It was a signal that the old rules of the game might not apply anymore. This quote from an oil industry analyst just nails it. The cost of doing business with Venezuela just went way up. See, for these smugglers, getting a fine is one thing. That's just a business expense. But the risk of having your entire multi-million-dollar ship and all its cargo taken from you, that is a completely different level of risk. And it's a very powerful reason to think twice.
So who's really feeling the pressure from this new crackdown? You got to look at China. Take a look at this chart. About a quarter of all of China's oil imports come from sanctioned nations. And how does it all get there? On the shadow fleet. This new, much more aggressive U.S. strategy exposes a huge vulnerability in Beijing's energy security. And that could give Washington a whole lot of leverage down the road.
And this isn't an isolated incident. The shadow fleet is now getting squeezed from all sides. While the U.S. is cracking down in the Caribbean, you've got Ukraine targeting Russian oil tankers in the Black Sea. For these ghost ships, the seas are getting a lot rougher, and the risks are multiplying.
So where does this all leave us? The big takeaway is that the seizure of the skipper is way more than just one incident. It feels like the start of a new, more confrontational era of economic warfare. We're used to sanctions and tariffs, things done on paper, but now we're seeing military force being used to back them up. And it leaves us with this really big and kind of unsettling question. Are the world's oceans about to become the next great battlefield for global power struggles?
If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like, follow, and stay tuned for more insights right here on FutureScope News.